Welcome back to Readers That Write. Do you have that one glaring weak point in your writing? Is that something that often causes some confidence issues or something that you feel like you have to edit to death to try and get right? Well, today we're going to talk about some easy tips to help improve those. As an author myself, I've experienced this a lot, and it is a very grueling experience to try and actually figure this out. But we've got a plan for you, and if you watch this all the way through, you'll have an easy way to improve everything and get your writing up to the next level. So, first off, how do we actually recognize the weak points in our writing? As an author, it is often really hard to actually see through all of the mist and confusion and all of the love you have for your stories after you've written them, or even while you're writing them. And it can often be really hard to figure out where your weak points as an author are. Every author has them. It should not be anything that you have any confidence issues about. You are still an amazing author, even if you have these. It's something that even Brandon Sanderson talked about this last year when he wrote Yumi. One of the big reasons he wrote Yumi the Nightmare Painter is because he had one of the big flaws that I have too. Our romance is not the greatest in all of books. There are some far better writers that are doing amazing things with romance that I struggle with. Brandon has said repeatedly that he struggles with. And we have to figure out how to actually go about fixing them. The first step is actually figuring out where the problem is. Sometimes you may notice that something doesn't feel right in your story, but you can't pinpoint where the problem is. So I've got 3 separate steps that could help you with this and will help you hopefully identify some of these problems. The first one is peer review. Writers groups are spectacular at this. And if you feel there's a spot where it just doesn't feel right, ask them. One of the rules my writers groups have is if you have a specific question or a concern that you're looking for an answer to, you can either, one of mine is virtual, so when you submit it, you just tag that question in the notes before the story, say, hey, something feels off here, I can't figure out what it is, help me figure it out. And in my in-person writers group, we do something very similar, but it actually comes at the end. After we've been through the critiques, we can then say, hey, I felt like something felt weird here. I couldn't figure out what it is. Were you guys able to see it? And peer review is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to actually get this cleared up, especially if you have diverse writers in your group. If you all write one genre and one type of writing and have very similar likes and dislikes when it comes to books and things like that, you run into an issue where all of you kind of see through the same lens. So having at least one writers group that is not all your genre of writers is massive. So one of the best ways to do this, there are writers guilds in almost every state. And if you look up that writers guild, for example, for me here in Utah, it's the League of Utah Writers, there is usually a general writers guild or writers group based locally in your area. This writers group will include everyone from fiction to nonfiction authors, romance, fantasy, science fiction, horror, you name it, they're usually there. And some of these peer reviews are one of the best ways, in my opinion, to find where your issues are. Having a group that's very focused on your genre and reads your genre regularly is also very important because it'll help you find holes in tropes, or if you're breaking the expectation of the reader or promising something that through a statement or a situation that's not being met, this is also a problem that they can help you find. So I always recommend having 2 writers groups, one that's just general writers and one that's more specific to you. This doesn't work for everybody, and that is okay. Everybody has their own systems. But either way, getting peer review is one of the first places you will see this at. The second place you'll see it at is with editors. Editors are also very, very good at focusing on this. And after an editor goes through your project, one of the easy questions you can always ask them is, where are my weak points? What are the things I can work on to improve so that the next manuscript you see will be better? I actually had the opportunity to do this with my most recent editor, who is fantastic. And one of the big ones she pointed out was my romance. I do a very good job with emotional connection, but romantic connection is where I struggle. And that's my big thing I'm focusing on next, which is actually kind of what inspired this video. So once you found your weak point, I forgot the third one. The third one is submissions. If you submit, I like to do it with short stories to test out and try different genres and different holes that I have. And when you submit, sometimes you'll just get a blanket no, which is very common. But sometimes you actually get somebody who responds to you. And if you get that, you can ask them a question too. No editor is going to be mad if you ask for advice. They may not respond. And if they don't respond, please respect that. A lot of them are very busy. But sometimes if they really liked your story, but it had one big hole, they'll respond and you'll actually get an opportunity to clean up the story. I actually had this exact situation happen a few weeks ago with a short story I had submitted. It had been having a hard time sticking. And finally, one editor responded with a fantastic email with some notes that I wasn't able to see because I was too close to the story. But as soon as she pointed out 3 or 4 things that needed to be fixed in the story, they now stick out like a neon sign. And she is absolutely right. So one of my goals here, after I get the current short story I'm working on up and ready, is to go back and revise that short story and fix the places that she pointed out. And then hopefully I'll have a chance to resubmit to her and to other places and get the story cleaned up so that it's a much higher quality story. Now, do not be afraid to ask. Most people in the writer's world are happy to help and want to help you improve your writing because your improved writing means better stories. While technically your better story is a competition of mine, we don't actually think that way. Very, very few writers actually think that way. Because in reality, the more books there are, the more readers there are. The more readers there are, the more opportunities we have to sell our stories. So most of the time, it's a net gain for us to share information and do things like have this conversation. And asking where my weak points are as a writer is completely valid and something that should be done. That being said, do not do it in the general comment section on the internet. Trolls will not help. You need to do it with people you trust or industry professionals that you can trust their reports. You may not always get the answers you like. That is okay. That is the point of this, is to push you outside your comfort zone and help you improve your writing. So once you found a few weak points, what can you do to fix them? There's a lot of different things we can do to help improve our writing. And a lot of people will jump straight to the last step, which is force yourself to write more of it. And while that is the correct last step of this process, I feel like there's a few steps before that that will help you improve your situation. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but here's the method I prefer. When I find a hole, for example, like I said, my big hole right now is romance. I am not good at creating the romantic bonds most of the time. I can pull it off sometimes. I'm kind of on the George Lucas scale there, where some of mine will be spectacular. I'll get the Han and Leia story, and then other ones will be kind of dumb and will seem forced. And it can pull away from the story. So my first step is to find authors that do it fantastically well. And this also applies to movies as well. Find movies and books that are renowned for their relationship. So watching date night movies for me has been really interesting. I've actually learned quite a bit from it. I've also got a couple of books slated. I believe next. Yes. Not the book I'm currently reading because I'm reading that to fit in so I can talk about it on podcast here in a few weeks. But the book after that, I'm actually going to be reading Fourth Wing, which is a book that's fantastically renowned for the relationships it builds and for the characters and things like that. And I'm going to be doing that along with a few other novels. I'm going to add a couple of Jancy Patterson's novels in there and a few others that are very well known for their relationships, especially their romantic relationships, and look at what they did while I'm reading them. Don't be afraid to take notes while you're reading. If you see something you like, mark it down. Look for traits that make that specific thing better in that writing. Another good example for this, besides romance, is if your prose are weak. This is something I've gotten a few times. I don't tend to write with very flowery prose. That's more my style. I tend to write more akin to a Brandon Sanderson, who writes very clear and concise, and makes it easy for readers to understand and to read. That's kind of one of my big goals. But if I do want to improve my prose, there's a few authors that I would absolutely dive into. I dive into the Neil Gaimans and Patrick Rothfuss, or even George R. R. Martin has some pretty good prose too. I would target those three authors and read them heavily, and then focus on ways that they are doing better than I am in their writing structure, in their prose. And then when that's done, look at social media and things like that, and look for things that inspire those authors. There may be, for example, one of the ways that I was working on prose, both Neil Gaiman and Patrick Rothfuss reference a lot of Celtic music and things like that in social media and in conversations and interviews. So I went and actually looked a little bit further into Celtic media and things like that to help me build even further. And once you've done all this, it can be a quick process. It can take a couple days. It can take a couple months. It can take a couple years. Don't get stuck in a loop, though. You can go down that rabbit hole and never write again. Please don't do that. So once you've spent your time, read a couple books, watched a couple movies, done a little bit of research to find out inspirations and things that help push those authors to do the thing well that you don't do well, now it's time to write. This is why I love short stories as well, because you don't have to try and force it into a novel. You can experiment in short stories and create worlds quickly that will allow you to test out your new found skills, test out the things you learned. And it may take a couple attempts. The first couple attempts may suck, which I am fully aware of from long and hard experience. But you actually may end up with some spectacular stories that will actually be really good to sell. And once you have that cleaned up, then you can turn around and apply that process to your novels. Novels are not a great place to experiment because they take so long to write. And often experimenting near the beginning of the book may cause issues at the end, or experimenting near the end of the book may cause issues at the beginning. It may cause entire rewrites to happen that weren't necessary because you were experimenting and it didn't work. So, like I said, write a couple of short stories and go from there. So some of the examples that I've done to try and expand my writing, one of the first things that I got a lot of was that the stakes weren't high enough, or the world wasn't as much in peril as it should have been because there wasn't a real fear of loss. And these comments at first confused me a little bit because I was checking all of the boxes in fantasy. So I couldn't really understand what exactly was wrong. But then a friend actually pointed me to the Warhammer 40k universe. Warhammer 40k universe is one of the places that's credited with the creation of the term Grimdark. It's a world where no one is actually succeeding. There may be a little sprinkle of hope, but it is a pretty dark and dreary place where people are fighting to exist. And I picked up a few of those books and read them. And I quickly realized what the difference was. There really weren't stakes. People weren't afraid of dying, and people weren't dying. And there weren't things more terrifying than death. So I've taken that and applied that. I first tested it out in a couple of short stories. One of them was terrible, and I actually think I deleted it because it's so bad. One of the other ones actually was a published finalist. And as soon as I got to that, I was able to apply it to stories. And books 2 and 3 of my Roots of Innovation series have a much darker lean than book 1. Book 1 is a little bit lighter, it tends to be more Tolkien-esque, but it gets a little bit darker in 2, even a little bit darker in 3. And now I actually tend to write a little bit more on the dark side than I do on the light side. So that worked fantastic. The next thing I struggle with is being too serious. This was a comment I received as well before the stakes aren't as high, so I applied this process again. And this is where I picked up Expeditionary Force and Mission Earth and looked at satire and how to improve it. And I worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. Still not great at it yet, but the most recent couple stories have actually seen some success. I've gotten some decent reviews on both of the 2 short stories, and I'm actually putting this a little bit to work on a short story I'm writing for an anthology as well. So I have seen some success with that as well. Now, the next one I'm working on, or going to start working on here soon, is my romance, because frankly, it is the worst part of my writing right now. And it is pretty glaring, while these other things have drastically improved. And my romance writing has been left behind. So my next step is to read through some of these more romance-heavy novels and find where they're succeeding versus where I'm not. And we'll start this whole process over again. Let me know what you guys think about this process. And if you have something that you want to start this with, do you guys have that hole that you're wanting to fill in your writing? So comment below and let's get a conversation going about some great recommendations on books and movies that can help with these specific issues. And if you liked what we've talked about today, don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell and get notified of any upcoming videos that we have coming that have some really cool opportunities to learn more about your writing. We'll see you next time.